Today, I'm breaking down real-world topology between AAA games, VFX, and animation. We're going to be focusing on why they're different and what's carried on between each one of these industries. So with that, let's jump right into it. So what I've done here is build on top of the mood board from my 3D art talk about topology across industries. This is a fully online living document. I am constantly adding more to this, showing more examples, and I've broken it up by video game topology, VFX, animation. It includes references from YouTube videos, behind-the-scenes breakdowns, art stations, to be able to study from this as a 3D art resource. I also want to give a big shout out to Next Level Game Art, as he has a YouTube channel that also does these deep dives into each one of these studios. He also shared the deep dives as a pure reference, and so of course I've been building my resource, and I found myself overlapping with a lot of what he has done. So I pulled in my favorite topology examples from that. So if you're interested in learning topology, he's a fantastic resource, so give his channel a visit and check out his videos. Now, this is not a step-by-step tutorial. We want to go through and really understand topology patterns and workflows, how topology is different, one, across industries, and when you're focusing on an industry, how they differ between things like environment, props, characters, vehicles, the time and era that these assets were created in, the target hardware and consoles, and of course, the context of whether or not this was a first-person, third-person, and isometric game, VR. All of these factors are going to have an impact on the type of topology you're seeing here. The key thing is we're training our eye on these different topology workflows. Now let's hit on the core principles here, specifically for games, right? Silhouette is kings. I've talked about this time and time on my YouTube channel, in my courses. So the priority here is going to be silhouette. Then we're going to see examples of when deformation and soft body animations, most specifically characters, impact topology. A character model is going to have vastly different topology than, say, a building. Then you'll see examples of how it varies from VFX, where you need high fidelity sub-D modeling in order to increase the details as needed. Then of course, the context that these assets are always created in. So I've just added this here, and we're going to talk about these fundamental topology techniques. So keep this in mind as we review each one of these assets. We're going to look at edge flow, localizing topology, how to utilize triangles as a tool, floaters, decals, and even trim sheets, and a high to low poly workflow. So with all of that context in mind, let's look at how these show up in specific games. And I love kind of jumping here back in the past, right? Where we look at props that were created for Batman, Arkham Origins, and Arkham Knight. And I think these are undoubtedly one of the best looking games for their time. And if we jump in, we can see the way that I've set this up is I have either links to ArtStation's articles, YouTube videos. So here I included the ArtStation artist, as well as a description of the asset that they created in context. So feel free to give them a follow and check out their stuff. And shout out to the studios that allow these artists to post these publicly. But we can see the level of detail. I mean, this is back on the PS3, Xbox 360, Wii U. These models look great. They're very well optimized, and they're focusing on the things that we've been talking about so far, which is optimization and silhouette. You absolutely need to focus on that when you're doing game art. Now, if we kind of jump into the future here a little bit, we can look at topology examples for now, let's say a character, right? This is exactly kind of what I mean. We now have a much higher level of fidelity for this character that was created by Andre here from CD Projekt Red for The Witcher Wild Hunt. Again, a beautiful display of this final model. We can see how this geometry for this lower garb here has a lot more geometry because it's, again, deforming, right? It's going to be waving and animating, but they even have some details here. They're not worrying about modeling all this little detail here, right? All of that is being used and coming from a texture. So you combine that with kind of the overall silhouette, you can get very, very high quality looking models using these tips and tricks to be able to get these high fidelity looking models. And we can see things like this where we have the hand, which is having a lot more soft body deformation here compared to these armor plates that are on the forearm. We can see these are a lot more simple because they just have to move with the whole hand. They're not actually deforming. So this is like a perfect example of where you have something that is higher fidelity. You just absolutely need this extra geometry here in the hand because all of this is soft body deforming. well, you don't need as much here for something like this bracer. Really, the focus here for this bracer is really just making sure that the silhouette and geometry is there. So now let's jump to another studio, probably hands down one of my favorites, Naughty Dog Studios. And this is now, we're looking at about 2017 Uncharted, third person, very focused on cinematic storytelling. And this model was created by Anthony and just does this amazing breakdown on these assets, right? So now we're looking at really what needs to be preserved. What needs to be preserved is the overall form, the overall silhouette of these models here. And they still need to be well optimized. Now you may be looking at this and saying, hey, why is there so much extra geometry, right? Like running down on these models. So, doing a little bit of research, I took a look at some other environment breakdowns, right? And so I came across another piece from Edgar Martinez here. And again, this is perfect, right? I love this because one, it shows that how they took The Last of Us Remastered and then updated it for The Last of Us Part 1. Then I saw the same thing here, right? As I was kind of looking into how Naughty Dog does things. And we look at here and we're just like, look at all this like crazy, just extra geometry. Anmar's telling us we don't need geometry on a flat surface. And this is what I mean about studying how studios do things. This may be far different than what we're noticing, maybe how CD Projekt Red does things, right? This is actually quite a bit different. It's now no longer a straight line, right? It's kind of like this, wavy, maybe it's deforming a bit. It's a little bit more chaotic, right? But again, it's all done with purpose and it's all done based on the studio's pipelines. So getting to the point, the reason why Naughty Dog goes about this route is because they use something called vertex blending. And I love this dialogue here, right? Shout out to Russell Hinton. He actually asked this exact question. He says, I'm curious as to why the walls have more subdivisions than needed. Was it light maps, normal issues? And I'm thinking the same thing. I'm in this exact same predicament. Thanks to Edgar, like he came in and said, hey, great question, and answered this perfectly. He said, this is for vertex blending, multiple textures. They're using a shader that has brick, grime, moss, damage, plaster, paint, and they use that and blend all those layers using vertex. So in order to blend all these different layers, you need vertices. So if we look at this, now we're looking at exactly what he's talking about. We are noticing we have brick here, right? So we get brick, we have some moss here, we have some grime now. And so this is an amazing technique to get a lot of texture information from your 3D geometry. And a lot of times it's a balance, right? Are we okay with the increased density in the meshes to be able to have something like vertex blending? And for a studio like Naughty Dog, I'm going to trust that they know exactly what they're doing. And they've built this pipeline over years and probably a couple of decades now, or at least a decade. So again, now you'll see all these different examples and now it makes sense. This context matters, right? You'll notice why it would look a little bit different in one studio or one game versus another. You combine that with something like trim sheets, right? So trim sheets are incredibly powerful because now instead of creating multiple materials with different tile textures, you can create sections or panels or trims within a single texture sheet that can be used to texture an object to have multiple different materials or trims. And when you combine trim sheets, vertex blending, you get these incredible looking environments that hold up. And we can see, these were captured on PS5. And the previous one was captured on PS4. So we can just see the level of fidelity that is being improved. Now we're looking at Santa Monica Studios, and again, another great example of God of War being updated between 2018 and then God of War Ragnarok. Both of these being the same game, which is a third-person game, but they're very focused on what? High fidelity and cinematic storytelling. And we look at this from Luciano and we just, look at the detail in these scrolls. You're like, wow, you look at that and you're like, that's an incredible amount of detail in here. And even these pillars, right? We're now, again, it's like, oh, now this makes sense. They're probably using a very similar workflow of being able to add in and use vertex blending for these types of assets. And we go in here and we kind of see, yep, it looks like, it's concrete, it's got scratches, it's got grunge, all of that makes complete sense. And then you combine that with like these techniques that we've been talking about, the 3-to-1, the localization of topology. And instead of routing all of these edges throughout the rest of the model, nope, they're all being terminated at this single point here. And so they completely stop. So again, all of this should now be clicking as you start to train your eye and see this. And here we see like the character rigging and animation. This is from a YouTube video that I pulled from a talk with Noman. And they talk about the process of going from the original God of War and what they had to do to make it cinematic and update it for the PS4 and then eventually the PS5. I mean, looking at this, this single image tells a massive story. We're still seeing the fundamental core topology between the two, right? Like we see all of this, we have the orbit of the eye, we have the orbit of the mouth. So, Kratos is still being animated. He's still deforming, we're still getting facial expression. But now, when you go between the legacy God of War versus the new one, we can now just achieve so much more emotion in our character animations. And just looking at these two as like two static stills, right? You can see how much more emotion is being conveyed in the right image because we have that extra detail. Now, keep in mind, there are things like diminishing returns. Eventually, you just can't continue to increase detail or increase mesh density and topology in order to get more realistic models. I would say we're at that point where now models went from, character hero props probably went between 20 to 50,000 triangles to now maybe 200 to 300 is what I've found, right? Like even Kratos here, we can see that they went from just having 25,000 triangles to about 70, right? If you want to learn game art the right way and not just follow random tutorials, I built a full game art program that walks you through the entire pipeline from an idea to a finished portfolio piece. It's split into 2 courses. Modeling and UV mapping foundations is the first one, and texturing, rendering, and presentation is the second. Each has over 40 modules, 15 hours of narrated content, exercises, time lapses, project files. And you're not doing it alone. You get access to a private Discord community where you can ask questions and get feedback along the way. If you want real-world production workflows you can use for both studio work and your personal projects, the program is live now. I'll see you there. And you'll notice other examples of, okay, here's CD Projekt Red again. And I like this by Mikhail, where they have these beautiful models. And I actually recreated the Cyberpunk innate on my channel, and I use sub-D modeling to low poly modeling. But what I found was they don't do standard traditional poly modeling. They're using things like Fusion 360, or maybe now some of them might be using plasticity or some sort of CAD modeling software. When you look at this, I immediately looked at that and I said, that's CAD. That's a CAD model right there. That doesn't look like standard topology. Maybe you might be able to get something close to this with a Boolean type workflow. But yeah, when you see stuff like this, this is a clear sign that this is using a CAD modeling software. And they have an incredible amount of fidelity. And with these CAD tools, you can control the tessellation and get something that looks very close to optimized, or that is optimized, right? And again, we'll see other examples. We'll see Mikhail here has these cybernetic arms, very awesome looking details. This one does look maybe like it was kind of standard modeled, but I love breaking these down and taking a look. So it looks like typically for these hard surface assets that they'll use a traditional CAD model. Look at the difference between this top piece with all these intricate details, and oh, would you look at that, right? Now we're starting to see kind of what we talked about, where you have all this extra geometry and you're like, oh, look at that. Is that all being CAD modeled? Believe me, I've worked with CAD my entire career. If you tried to include this into CAD, the amount of density that you would have to get in a piece like this would be insanely high. So what they're doing instead is using floaters, right? I love this technique, and such a beautiful example that most likely go unnoticed by a lot of people. All of these little guys here, right? Completely separate geometry, created as floaters, and looks absolutely awesome in this final output. So we can look at the final textured version, right? That's what it looks like with the final texture. And you can just see the level of detail in here, and it looks fantastic, right? And now as you look through other assets, you'll start to notice those small details. And for you as a 3D artist, you can learn from it and start to implement that into your own workflow, whether you want to even work in AAA or do your own hobbyist stuff or just do this for the love of the game, right? And then we have things like from Baldur's Gate, right? And I love Baldur's Gate, right? Because now this is where the variables, the context is impacting this. And what I mean by that is this is a recent game, relatively, right? 2023, latest consoles, but it's isometric. So now camera distance and camera proximity is impacting this greatly. We now no longer have to worry about zooming in and getting in really close to these assets. Yes, you have interactions and cinematics and dialogue and stuff like that, but most of that effort is focused into the character art. So we look at this by Ian here, we can see just looking at this model, it looks incredibly high detailed. He's like, yeah, I can't really notice any faceting. I mean, granted, it is a fairly simple geometric model, but look at the topology. Now we look at this and you're like, oh my God, like, look at the amount of detail that's being used here. And it's just, I mean, I love these types of examples because it's like every single triangle is modeled with absolute intention, right? This is, again, the context that I love talking about, right? And it's so easy for me to just geek out about this stuff because it honestly goes underappreciated, right? This is balancing the artwork and the artistic ability and technical art and being able to create an asset that looks very high detailed while still being incredibly optimized and efficient. And all of that is using this high to low poly workflow, right? Where he's got these great looking models, sculpted, detailed. Maybe he did some cloth simulation and all that is being baked down to these low poly models. And here I love this example, right? Because now we're going from something that looks, you're like, okay, that's calm down on Mars. It's just a square. It's just a cube with some textures. Let's look at something more organic, right? Now we're looking at a ship, right? We're applying the exact techniques that I've been talking about, which is localizing topology, using triangles to your advantage. So let's jump right here, right? This is exactly what I'm talking about. Let's look at the silhouette here. We have an area where we have a lot of curvature. And then now we don't want to run in all of these edges. Instead, what we have now is this localization of topology, terminating these edges right here while giving us this extra geometry and this extra curvature. And every single vert here is adding to the overall silhouette of this model. We have curvature and localized geometry exactly where we want it. We're preserving the details throughout the model. We're terminating and removing edges where we just don't need them. And here, maybe this is a good example of something, this sail here that needs this even distribution. Why? You should be answering that yourself right now. Why? Because this is soft body deformation. You have a rigid animated object, which is the entire hull of the ship that's moving and doing its thing. But then you have probably some wind effects that's applying to the sail. So now we have this type of geometry where, okay, now we're going to be soft body deformation, right? And all of this now, you should be connecting these dots, right? Where it should be making complete sense as to why things are done the way they are. Here's this weapon that is going to be probably given a lot more attention because it will be closer to the camera and maybe there will be used in cinematics and you'll have a menu where you can focus in and look on your weapons, right? And look at this, the amount of detail that's added here. I mean, I would say without a doubt, like probably one of these weapons may have the same amount of detail as this entire ship here, right? So then if I go down and we take a look, I mean, boom. Again, we're noticing all this detail here, right? Like we're just bringing in these edges, terminating right here as it goes up, adding in geometry where we're needing it. We're focusing on the silhouette. All of this beautiful detail that's being added. I mean, look at this. I love this example right here, right? Because now, what are we doing? We're going from 1, 2, 3, all the way down to 1. That's what I mean by 3 to 1, 4 to 1, 2 to 1. You're using those techniques to just preserve and give details for the silhouette because this is now like spider webbing and spreading throughout the geometry because you need these 3 edges here. Why? Because now it's impacting the form and the silhouette of our model, right? And we look at the fully textured version, all of that area is kind of being brought down to right about here and here. There's a lot more example. I'm going to hit on one more for the sake of time. I got a lot of other content in here and even examples of VR games and PS4 games and Diablo 4. Shout out to this artist here, Mateus, because he just does such an amazing job presenting and doing breakdowns of his models. Because here, like I came across this one, beautiful model. What I love about this is I was like, oh my God, look at this beautiful sub-D modeling. And this man essentially is bending sub-D modeling to his will. Right? That's what I love about it. Because if you're like, oh, look at that beautiful topology. And you're like, wait, what the hell? What's going on here? Right? Oh my God, look at this. All this craziness. You're like, what is this? What? Why is he allowed to do that? And I've talked about it on my channel, and I've talked about it time and time again. You can have nGons in areas that are flat without any surface artifacts whatsoever, right? But even better still, let's take a deeper dive, right? He has other examples of some really fantastic sub-D models like this tank model here. Some of these are actually not on flat surfaces. Some of these are right on an area of curvature. But if you look at it, I mean, there are no shading artifacts whatsoever in here. And there's something you have to keep in mind is that he is using sub-D modeling, he is using nGons, he's using it as a high to low workflow with the ultimate purpose of gathering this high poly detail here and baking it and texture baking it into this low poly model. So you might be thinking to yourself, all right, well, this man like Mateus is just killing it with nGons and sub-D modeling and doing whatever he wants, and it looks amazing. Why can't I do that with VFX and animation? The reason why is because what you are seeing here for these models are rigid models, meaning maybe this entire cable car here is being animated, this tank will be animated, like you're going to be opening and closing hatches, it'll be driving around, but it is a rigid vehicle. And the shading looks great, it looks impeccable. Contrast that with what we see down here, right? We're now looking at these types of models that absolutely need quads for sub-D models because we're now coming back to what we said at the beginning, soft body deformation, right? And here is like, this is Digital Domain. They created a cinematic trailer for Ghost of Tsushima. So don't get confused because when you look at this, you're like, oh, you know, here they're using this crazy detailed sub-D model. Like look at the density on Jin, the main character, right? Beautiful, beautiful sub-D modeling here. Beautiful topology. Shout out to the artist that made this. His eyes are closing and blinking, right? All of that is soft body deformation, right? You need that density, right? Like you see here for these other examples with a character, some creatures. We have Stranger Things and Vecna. And here's what I love about this example here, right? I know I kind of jumped from games to VFX, but this gives you full context as to the spectrum of topology and how it's being used. Like in this example from Tron Ares, we zoom in here and we see, okay, yeah, this is using standard sub-D modeling. Like I modeled the car from beginning to end on my channel, and it is created as a sub-D model, meaning that it is for VFX or animation or product visualization. We need that topology. We need that sub-D effect because now if this is VFX, we're looking at this on a giant big screen at a very, very high resolution. And all of this is being offline rendered. So we now don't have to worry about real-time optimization like we do for games. We can crank this up to 2, 3, 4 subdivisions, right? And here's like this great example from Gran Turismo, right? The movie, not the game, right? Look at the just detail and density of this hero car, right? This Nissan GTR. I mean, it is just a beautiful display of modeling and topology. You're looking at this in its full frame on the big screen, incredibly high resolution, and you can crank this up to whatever subdivision that you need and have all of that detail there, right? And again, you'll see all sorts of examples. Honestly, I can spend probably hours here on each single one, but I'll break this up into a smaller series, a lot easier to digest, but this should give you the starting point, right? The way that I kind of bounced around and used this board is how you should be using it to learn, right? We're looking at all these different types of topology techniques. We're looking at it across industry. So again, we're looking at games, VFX, animation, and here we can see animation down here. So we see, standard Pixar. I brought this up in my last video about this. We have, the same type of localization of topology techniques. Then within each industry, we have the context, right? We look at something like this, for example, beautiful clean topology. We understand why we have an even distribution of edges here because it's using vertex blending. And within environments, I mean, you'll see examples of topology that looks nice and clean, but then you'll have stuff that looks organic, that looks like this, like rocks. Rocks don't need to be perfectly clean, even distributed geometry, right? You can sculpt it and probably decimate it and get the natural looking organic details that you need. And so we have environments, we have props, we have weapons, we have character models, right? Like I have one down here from Insomniac Studios, and like, again, perfect example from Marvel Spider-Man. This is the 2018 version, so the original version. So we can see very optimized techniques, and we can see how, a vehicle is going to be different from an environment prop, which is going to be different from a character. Like, I love this because this is a character. This entire suit needs to be perfectly even distributed. So Again, I can just keep going here, but you should get the idea. All of this will be completely available. I'll put the link in the description below. You can just sign up with your email. You should get an email to this exact link. This is a living document that can be used just to help you study and train and tune your eye to really be a 3D artist that understands topology. And as always, if you actually want to learn how to build this stuff, be sure to check out my courses. So with that, I'll see you in the next one.